On average, 63% of tech startups fail and 25% close within the first year. Only 10% of tech startups survive in the long run. But really, the biggest hurdle is going from 0 to 1, especially on the technology side. What do you build? How? How do you keep the cash flowing to survive that early stage? How do you build your team? It's hard. My guest today, Shawn Coe, has almost 30 years of experience in the tech industry, and he has built a career helping companies scale in early stages and build a viable business. From engineer to product manager to CTO to advisor, he's been there, he's done that, and he's here today to share his story and help us answer important questions on how to get your business started. Shawn, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for the invite and thank you for the kind words in the introduction there. When you say 30 years of experience, it hits me a little bit right off the bat, and that does explain the white in my beard. But I have been at this for a long time, and I've been in this startup space for more than a decade now. And there's so much that I love about it, sort of the energy and unbridled enthusiasm that you get here. Just doesn't exist in other places. But of course, as you mentioned, with that comes a lot of uncertainty and comes a lot of risk.
Yep.
And most often I've encountered people in roles that I've been in or roles where I've advised or consulted. People are passionate generally about what they're doing, and they're subject matter experts at whatever that thing is. And that's great. And that'll get you started. And it's an interesting story, but that isn't going to get you to be successful, right? The next step from there is, how do I turn this thing, this idea into a product? And most tech founders, I think, are not necessarily software engineers or product managers or engineering managers. And so that piece of it is really important, right? Execution matters.
Yep.
And having that sort of experience and having someone to kind of shepherd you through that, I think is really important. It's part of the fun of it, but as you say, it's part of the risk of it as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Shawn, let's get started with the very basics. What do you do today for a living?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I'm actually just about to embark on a new role that I'm super excited about. I just finished a contract CTO role at the end of last month, and took a few weeks here to enjoy the holidays and kids home from school, vacation from college. I'm just about to start a new role as a product engineering lead for Parity Technologies. And Parity is one of those companies where if you are in the Web3 space, you certainly would know who they are. And if you're not in the Web3 space, you probably don't know who they are. They are a blockchain services provider, and they are, one of the OGs in that space. And there's a lot about their system and their solution that people would know. They always rank very, very highly in decentralization scores. They do care very, very deeply about the ethos of Web3. Anyway, their primary product is called Polkadot, and it is a whole ecosystem, and there's more in that than probably fits in the context of this question or this conversation. But I'm super excited to be starting that. I'll be doing that next week. But yeah, otherwise I've been in tech for a long time. I like to joke with people, although it's true. My very first job in technology was working on the Y2K bug. Um, and that's the very first task that I was part of. And I worked for a company that was owned by Ross Perot,
Oh,
who
wow.
is yes, Electronic Data Systems. They're eventually acquired by GM and then later by HP. But I worked for them when they still belonged to Ross Perot, and people generally know him because he was the most successful or unsuccessful, depending on how you view the results of the 92 election. Was that when it was? Third party candidate in
Right.
US presidential
Right.
history. So yeah. So I've been doing it ever since, and I've had a handful of different roles in different industries. And I think it's kind of made me a little bit of a polyglot. One of the other things I tell people is, if you need somebody that has 25 straight years of C++ experience and is the best C++ programmer in the world, that's not me.
Right.
You need somebody that's, been part of a bunch of different industries and been part of solving a handful of problems and has been successful and unsuccessful in the startup space. Then maybe I'm a better match.
What are some of the experiences that you're proudest of, right? That you think make Shawn who he is today?
Oh my God, that's a really good question and a really interesting question. I mean, the first ever real senior leadership job I had was for a school district. Actually, it was for a big school district here in New Hampshire, where I was in charge of the tech department, and that included all kinds of things. It included things like the classroom aides who help first graders get logged onto computers. But it also included video production folks. It included social media folks. It included developers. It included database administrators. It included networking people and security people. And I think really, the first big step that represented for me was, yes, the breadth of responsibilities, but the other piece of it was the sort of public facing nature of it.
Right.
Um, the plans that I had and the priorities that I had and the budgets that I had and the successes and failures that I had were all publicly presented and publicly defended. And I think that was a wonderful learning experience for me. And then I guess the next big thing were the first forays I had into the startup space, because that is a whole different world. And I had the same experience, joining the Web3 world now that I had joining the startup space. You kind of get in there, and there's a little bit of that fire hose experience, right?
Mm.
And there's a little bit of the sort of wide-eyed experience and reaction to the nature of the work and the nature of the space. But at the same time, it's like incredibly addicting and it's incredibly sort of powerful and incredibly invigorating. So I think it's those couple of moments, that first really big public facing responsibility that I had, and then diving into these brave new worlds.
Nice. And so during the last 10 years, you have been working with startups. What
Yeah.
are, in your experience, the keys to successfully launch a business in tech and scaling from 0 to 1?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right? That's the $1 million question. I think that's separating the 90% from the 10%. And I think one of the realities is, I think there's a couple of realities that you have to sort of deal with off the bat. One of them is there is a fair amount of luck that goes along with it. Now, luck is the residue of design. And I like the Eisenhower quote that goes something like, plans are worthless, but the ability to plan is priceless. So to a large degree, you can influence your ability to be lucky. And I think that is true. And it's a space too that's evolved over time, right? Like, and the ideas around it. You see lots of discussions on LinkedIn now, debating the merits of acquiring venture funding as soon as possible versus bootstrapping as long as possible. You see lots of debates on LinkedIn now about who to hire in those initial phases and what level of expertise they have. Do they need to be on-site employees? Do they need to be US employees? And I think those are all fair questions. And I think this is the other sort of reality. Like a lot of those things, you can find examples of people that have chosen all of those different paths and that are wildly successful and that haven't been successful. So not trying to suggest those decisions aren't important and don't matter and not part of the consideration, but I don't think that they're the sort of reason that people are successful or not. I can share some of the things that I've kind of learned in the way I see this, right? Like at the end of the day, what matters is that you are solving a real problem that exists in the market and that someone, lots of someones, are willing to pay for that problem, right? I have been involved in startups that have some really, really cool tech, and it did kind of solve a problem. It kind of invented a problem to be solved. And in that case, we weren't really successful in that respect. So I think having this really almost obsessive focus on the customer, right? This is a cliche, but it's true, right? We're here to solve a problem. We're not here for me, and we're not here for you. We're here to solve some problem the customer has, and the solution for that problem needs to be sufficient in its size and its breadth and its depth that somebody is willing to pay for it. So I think it does kind of start with that. This is a cliche, but it does sort of start with that product market fit, right? What is the problem that exists in the market? How can I solve it? And how can I solve it in a way that people are willing to swipe their card for it?
Very, very important. And what happens next, right? You find the problem, and okay, it's a problem that needs to be solved, and people are willing to pay for it. What comes next? Building the team, finding the money, both. What will you say comes next?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of individual circumstance that exists there, right? I am a believer that lots of people raise money and are successful, and it's a win-win situation for both them and the investor. But my personal opinion is, if you can bootstrap, as long as you can bootstrap, whatever, we all have our own sort of financial constraints,
Right.
and we're all going to run into a math problem at some point. But the earlier you take money, the more expensive that's going to be in terms of equity.
Right.
And the more risky it's going to be, right, in terms of your sort of ability to execute it, ability to own the plan, and ability to own the product and the outcome. And so, I would advise people, as long as they can, understanding we do have our own math problems, as long as you can, bootstrap this. That being said, I think there are some things that are true. Whether or not, wherever you're going to get sort of these initial hires that are going to be a part of this initial team, they got to be really good. This isn't a time to, in my opinion, to have sort of a mix of a couple of senior, a couple junior, an intern, some project folks. This is a stage where there are so few employees, all of them matter, and their skill sets matter, and their approach matters, and their ability to execute and deliver matters. So all of these people, you have to be aligned with in terms of your goals. You have to be aligned with in terms of your expectations, and you have to be able to rely on them. So I believe that, if you want to go quickly in this beginning stage, it's a really small team with a really refined scope as much as possible, with a singular focus that you're all aligned on. And these need to be rock stars. Wherever you find them is okay, in my opinion. I don't think the particular patch of dirt that you are born on or live on has anything to do with your skills as a developer or a product manager or a salesperson or whatever. But this initial group, I believe strongly, needs to be very, very capable and very aligned.
Is there a recipe for vetting those initial team members,
Oh,
or a
yeah.
place to find them, or it's like a case by case basis?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you have existing relationships, I try to tap into those first. People that you've worked with in the past, people that you've trusted, people you've seen deliver, references from folks that can really thoroughly vet folks. I think it's pretty hard to get that initial cohort off a LinkedIn post, right?
Right.
You're going to get 10,000 responses. You're not going to be able to give it due diligence. And it's really, really hard, given the importance of those first hires, to be able to adequately vet that. So I always sort of tap into my own network first. This is a day-to-day thing, right? That becomes important. I may have said this to you before. You have a certain title on LinkedIn, and you're going to get 100 messages a day.
Yeah.
And those messages are people that have a service, a development service, staff augmentation of some kind, and they're trying to provide that service to you. And I think that I don't have empirical data to support this, but I bet it's true. I bet most of them provide a good service,
Right.
and that provide a good value, but I can't vet them.
Yeah.
I just don't have the time and ability to vet them. And that's why sort of relationships matter, because from a practical perspective, I need a shortcut.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how we got connected as well, working with the Jane AI folks. And I've been really, really sort of impressed with the team they've put together there. And that matters, that experience matters, and that reference matters, and that existing relationship and connection matters. Down the road, you get 1,000 employees you can hire from LinkedIn.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Shawn, so we're scaling from 0 to 1. We have the team, we have the money, either bootstrapped or we fundraise some stuff. What are some of the challenges that these companies are going to face? What are some of the pitfalls that you typically see?
Oh, yeah, where to start? You could make a whole podcast on that episode, right? So, falling in love with the tech, I think, is one of them. Falling in love with the tech and not in the problem that you're solving. I think having some degree of um, agility and nimbleness to sort of pivot based on customer feedback is important. There is a corollary to that. I see this discussed once in a while on LinkedIn, but not to the degree I think that it warrants. Yes, right. Like, these initial customers matter. I had a CTO years ago that used to say, every plan will work if you're willing to iterate on it. And I believe in that, right? Like, get it out there, get some feedback, incorporate the feedback, and rinse and repeat until you have a really good product. And I think that's true. But there is a real trick to it at times, right? Like, not every piece of feedback is of equal value.
Right.
And not every direction that a customer wants to take the product is of equal value, or aligns with your vision, or aligns with your perspective on the product, and maybe doesn't even align with your own best interests for the product going forward. So it does require this really kind of delicate balancing act of having the humility and agility to not fall in love with your idea. Don't fall in love with your tech, but also sort of remain true when you're incorporating that feedback to what matters to you, right? As a company, as an organization, and then what is going to be best for you. So yeah, I think those are interesting things. I see some people fairly commonly in my experience doing some consulting that carry a little bit of that sort of imposter syndrome with them. And this is what I mean by it in this case. They're really good at seeing the flaws in the product they've built. They can look at the product and see the roadmap ahead. And that's all great, but I have seen several cases where that has delayed people getting a product that's really pretty good in the hands of customers. And it's really delayed this sort of iterative feedback loop that's really important. And in return, that has exacerbated financial pressures
Hmm.
that often come, and all kinds of things happen when the financial pressures are exacerbated. Um, so that's a delicate balancing act too, right? There's a product guy that I worked with years ago. You can tell you're old when all of your stories begin with years ago. Uh, that that would always anytime someone said MVP, right? We're all familiar with what that is. He would correct them and reframe it as MSP, what he referred to as the minimum sellable product.
Right.
And
Right.
it's a small change, right? But he's trying to define viable, not as something that works and does something, but in more specifically, as something someone is willing to pay for.
Right.
And I've repeated that. I think that's a great bit of wisdom. And I've repeated that a bunch of times when folks are trying to figure out, like, when do I take this to design partners? When does a design partner go from design partner to a paying customer? When is some sort of general launch for this? And I think viable is a nebulous term. And I think reframing that as sellable, I think maybe is a better marker about when to take some of those steps.
I love it. Um, so so things are starting to work. Now you're growing. Now you need to build a bigger team. What are your lessons learned on how to build high performing teams? What are the keys to success when you're getting to that larger team scale?
Yeah, one step at a time. For one thing, I think everything gets done one step at a time.
Right.
Um, and, I think that, and it starts with getting the right people on the bus. And to me, there's really sort of two questions that I'm trying to answer. Are you a cultural addition to the organization? And can you do the work? And can you do the work? I think most of the time, most people aren't building rockets. If you're building rockets, focus on the top 10th of a percent of engineers. But if you're not, look for people with a sort of a curious mind and some humility. I believe that grit is the greatest predictor of success. I do think you can teach that, but it's great if you come with it. So look for those things in this next cohort of hiring, right? Because these are the people that are really going to scale it.
Yeah.
This is the point where I, as a CTO or product leader or whatever the case is, I have to sort of, by default or by necessity, hand over the reins to scaling. So these are people that I need to be able to trust their decisions of. Um, and having that curious mind, having a rigorous approach, and having that humility, I think allows me to put in place sort of a framework, some minimum processes, right? Just some guardrails. Here's our development process. Here's our bug fix process, whatever they are, um, and then kind of let you own that from there, and let you scale that from there. Um, and I do think that there is this, especially you get that check from the venture capitalist, right? And super excited about the numbers in your bank account, and you've been thinking about this, and you've been planning for this, and spreadsheet says I'm going to hire 10 developers, so the temptation is to go out and hire 10 developers today.
Right.
um,
Right.
and I need it, right? Like, I need them. I raised the money for a reason. We need to get going. Urgency matters. um, but what is the saying? Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast.
Right.
Um, and I think that has to be the case with hiring too, because you're still at the stage where it matters. You're still at the stage where a bad hire has a big influence.
Right.
It matters. Because you're going to have to get these things right. This is what is going to let the this is what's going to facilitate the organization being able to execute at scale, right? Getting this sort of round right. Yeah.
I love it again. Now we when we were getting ready for this, we talked about game theory and what are your thoughts there? What are your thoughts on how to apply that when working with early stage companies?
So I love game theory. Um, I went back, there's so many of these. It's so cool, I think. There's so many colleges you can just take like free courses online. You can audit courses online. They put the whole course out there. I watched the whole Yale game theory class on YouTube. And it was amazing. It was so much fun. I put the headphones in, I walk the dogs, I listen to it, and I try to take out of it what I can. And to me, like if I could greatly oversimplify this, to the sort of most basic first principles component of this, it is align your incentives, create incentives that will drive the outcome that you want. Um, in the long run, at scale, the outcomes that you have are going to be a result of the incentives that are put in place.
Right.
Um, so be smart in the beginning to set up incentives to drive the behavior that you want, to drive the outcome you want. So the super simplified game theory application from someone who didn't study game theory in college, wasn't even an economics major in college, is that it's aligning, pay attention to the incentive structures you have in place. And if you're getting outcomes that are not satisfactory or not what you planned or not what you hoped for, think about what the incentive structures are, because in the long run, that is what is going to drive the outcomes. So be intentional about it, but also be reflective about it when you're looking about how things are going. They are going to drive action.
Very interesting. I love it, and I love the simplification. Right, it's about incentives alignment. Right, when we talk about game theory, we might think it's more complex than we think, but it's that basic but difficult thing to do of aligning incentives changes the game.
I think so. I think so. I think so much of economics, this is the impression I got throughout my college education. Economics is one of those disciplines that at its core is actually quite simple, but is made quite difficult by the language and by the jargon and by the terminology. And I think for most of us, we're not trying to set interest rates at a national level or sort of drive national level consumer behavior. For most of us, it's relatively simple, and yeah, I do believe that.
Um, let's talk about the elephant in the room, AI. What are your thoughts on AI, and how is this technology going to shape our work in years to come? I know it's a tough question when I say years to come, and things change so fast. But what are your thoughts?
It's a tough question, right? And you're going to immediately be one of two people. You're going to be a doomsayer, you're going to be a denier, or you're going to be a fanboy. I guess one of three people, right?
Right,
Um, yeah, I don't see how this doesn't have an incredibly profound impact.
right,
I look at some of the things that are being done today, um, and I think it's really, really amazing. I mean, I think one of the things I think about, the entire discipline of software engineering, we can debate about when it started as a discipline, right? But regardless of what date you pick as the dawning of software engineering, it fits in the lifespan of one human being.
yeah,
This is not a profession that's been around for 1,000 years.
yep,
Um, Claude, the Anthropic LLM, went from scoring 5% on the SWE bench. The SWE bench is a benchmark test for how well AI does at coding, right?
yeah,
Um, in 10 months, it went from 5% to 50%. It's one version of the Claude model. And I know someone is going to tell me that you can game benchmark tests. And that's true, right? But it's 10 months.
yeah,
I mean, how long have LLMs been in mainstream use a couple of years. I think it's insane. I honestly think it's insanity to not see this as incredibly transformational for literally everything that we touch. Um, I think that the combination of AI and robotics will lead to virtually every job being able to be done by a machine. Now, I don't know what the when is, and the when is the real question, right? I don't know if, as Sam Altman would tell us, they know how to do AGI and
Right.
it's coming in 2025. I don't know if that's true or not, um, but I don't think it's 50 years away.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that man, I don't know. It seems like we've made an awful lot of progress in an awful short amount of time, and
Yeah.
there's an awful lot of investment in this across the globe. Um, so it's hard for me to imagine that this isn't incredibly transformational in the short term. I
Yeah.
mean, what are the you go back to the last was this 2 elections ago? I don't remember when Andrew Yang ran. One of the things that he would say is the two most common jobs in the United States are cashier and driver.
Yeah.
And was this 2020? I guess so. And those are already being done by machines. And that was 5 years ago. I mean, some of these AI companies that are doing groundbreaking things didn't even exist.
Yeah. I remember, what was it, like 2019, 2018, reading an article that had been written by the GPT version of back then. Like, look, it can write an article, right? And it was like, oh wow. And some people were getting like, oh wow, it can write an article, right? And today it can
Yeah.
pass the bar exam. It can do, whatever you want it to do. Like, like you were saying, it's I go from the three personas that you described. I jump from one to the other continuously. Um, there's
Yeah.
there's there's part of me that is super scared, and there's part of me that thinks, I think we are not dreaming bigger yet. I think we are at that point where, like, I don't know. I like to believe that we are at that point, like in the early beginnings of the last century, when electricity was getting around on the phone and stuff, and right, and people were super scared, like, oh, we're all going to die and there's nothing else
Yes.
we will do, blah 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 blah. And then new things appear, right? I'm still looking for those new things to appear, like you said, right? I mean, I'm still looking like, okay, when jobs start being taken away by AI, etc., etc., what new things we will start doing.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really interesting point and a really, really interesting way to look at that, right? Like, because at the moment, for the most part, for most of us, right, like it'll help me write this letter.
Yeah.
It maybe will help me debug a coding thing. Maybe I don't like writing unit tests, so it'll help me write the unit tests. But and those kinds of things drive real efficiency and maybe at some scale can replace right now can replace some jobs, right? At some scale. If I had a staff of 100 engineers, maybe I need 97 now.
Right.
um, but right, we don't have the sort of like amazing new thing
Right.
yet that came from it in the same way that you did with electricity. A fun little side note, if you've ever seen the Pessimist Archive, I think that's what it's called. So they have they basically collected news stories over the years, whereby some emerging technology at the time was going to be the death of humanity.
Right.
Uh, and of course, none of them have yet. And, obviously the point of it is like, well, AI is probably not going to be either, because you told me the car was going to be, and electricity was going to be, and cell phones was going to be, and oh, the Walkman. Remember the Sony Walkman that was banned in some places.
Really.
Yeah. So people were worried about things like you walking down the street with it and getting hit by a car.
Right, right,
Just
right.
not aware of your surroundings. And you know, one of the things going to happen with this that happened with previous technology is we are our ability to use the technology to execute with the technology is going to outpace our ability to do it responsibly. So
Oh
initially you see people with the Walkman that are driving with it. Well, that probably wasn't a good idea. And those kinds of things are going to happen and continue to happen with AI as well. But yeah, a pessimist archive. I'll put a plug in for them.
yes, 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 yes. We'll see, we'll see. Um, Shawn, what drives you, and what's next for you? Sunday, you're thinking about the week, or you're thinking about, your 2025 resolutions. What drives you?
Yeah, I think at heart, I am a builder. I do like to make things. I like to see them come to life. I like to see them get used.
Right,
Maybe it's a little too Pollyanna to say I like to solve customer problems. Um, because maybe the root of it is I like to build things and I like to
right,
build things that matter and I like to build things that work. Um, you know, I tried a couple of years ago on the side, I decided I wanted to be a day trader. It's not that hard, right? It's just math. Well, it turns out it's a little bit harder than I gave it credit for. But the other thing that I wasn't expecting was I didn't enjoy it. And I didn't enjoy it because I felt like I wasn't doing anything. Okay, I made some money. I looked at a chart and I hit buy at the right time and sell at the right time. But nothing happened as a result of that.
hmm,
I didn't make anything. I didn't make anyone else any better at all. Um, I just literally clicked a button twice at the right time. And it was disappointingly unfulfilling for me. And but I did realize at that time, like, I need to build something.
right.
I want to build something.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
So
very
it's
nice.
2025 goal.
Shawn the Builder. Uh,
Yes.
Shawn, one last random question to you. What do you do when you are not working?
I mean, I do like to work. And some of the times I work when I'm not working.
Right.
And you know, I think of it as you know, do it because you love it. Don't do it because I want to tell my boss I'm still working.
Right.
Don't do it because I want to post at 3 a.m. on LinkedIn that I'm working. I do it because I love it. I do two things outside of work, though. I have two kids that are one just graduated from college, one is still in college. She's a senior this year, and I follow her lacrosse games wherever they are.
Nice.
Um, I coached sports for a number of years, and we'll get back into that at some point. Um, I am an avid hiker. I like to be outside, particularly in the woods and in the mountains. I have a couple of dogs that are hobbies of mine. I spend a good deal of time training them and spend a good deal of time outside with them. Try to stay physically active. Otherwise, go to the gym. I think that has a really sort of powerful ability to sort of refocus yourself and remove any sort of anxiety that you have. I'm definitely a foodie. I liked your video the other day. I like to cook and eat um, and travel. I think a lot of typical things. I'm too ADHD to read. I like to do it, but I can only do it in small doses before I'm too easily distracted.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, normal kinds of things, I think.
Shawn, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. Very, very clear answers. Look, I typically go back to the episode and try to find a snippet that then I will use to post. And to be honest, you were so crystal clear on so many of your responses that I will have a hard time choosing one of them. But I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yes, likewise. Next time we can do it in Spanish. And my goal as somebody, I should have said, I do some photography on the side. And one of the things you think about maybe as a podcaster, you too, but like, do not have the attitude that you can fix this in Photoshop because it's a lot of work. It's a
Right.
lot less work to get it right the first time.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
you can fix it, but it's going to be 1,000 hours to fix it. So,
Very true.
yeah.
Very true.
I have someone to introduce you to as well that is looking for some resources. And I had recommended you exactly what I said is true, right? I do get 100 messages a day. 99% of them are probably